He was one of the richest men in Dubai, a name whispered with awe in boardrooms and palaces alike. Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid, a billionaire oil magnate, lived a life of power, elegance, and control. But behind the golden gates of his desert mansion, a single decision would come back to haunt him. Years ago, he humiliated a poor American maid, dismissed her as worthless beneath his world. What he didn't know was that life has a strange way of bringing people back when you least expect it. Tonight, we'll witness a story of pride, karma, and redemption, when a man who had everything ends up depending on the one person he once rejected. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. It helps us bring more powerful and inspiring stories like this one to you. Dubai, 2012. The Al Rashid Palace stood like a modern fortress carved from gold and glass, its marble floors echoing with the footsteps of maids, guards, and servants who dared not look up when the master of the house walked by. Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid was only 38, but he already owned hotels, oil refineries, and a private jet fleet with his name embroidered on the leather seats. His reputation was one of authority, perfection, and cold efficiency. He expected obedience, and nothing less. That morning, the palace buzzed with preparation. A delegation from London was arriving for a multi-million-dollar partnership, and every detail had to be flawless. Khalid, dressed in a crisp white kandura, his keffiyeh perfectly folded, moved through the hall like a general inspecting his army. His face was calm, but his eyes, sharp and unreadable, missed nothing. In the corner of the grand hall, a young woman knelt beside a marble column, nervously scrubbing a spill of coffee she hadn't caused. Her name was Emily Carter, a 26-year-old American who had arrived in Dubai 6 months earlier, desperate for work. She had no family, no connections, just a tourist visa she'd overstayed, and the promise of survival if she could stay invisible. She spoke little Arabic, but she was quick, kind, and never complained. When the head housekeeper barked orders, Emily obeyed without hesitation. But that day, fate decided to test her. As she hurried to replace a tray of crystal glasses in the meeting room, her hand trembled. One glass slipped, then another, until the entire tray crashed to the marble floor. The sharp sound froze everyone in place. Even the housekeeper gasped. And then came him. Khalid entered the room like a storm. His voice was calm, but the silence that followed it was terrifying. "Who did this?" he asked, his tone like steel. The servants glanced nervously at Emily. She rose to her feet, trembling. I'm so sorry, sir," she whispered, her accent soft and foreign. "It was an accident." "An accident?" Khalid's gaze swept over her like a blade. "You break things worth more than your salary for a year and call it an accident?" Her cheeks flushed red with shame. She tried to explain, to apologize again, but her words tangled in fear. "I'll pay for them," she said weakly, clutching her apron. "Please, just let me make it right." He stepped closer, towering above her. "You can't pay for anything here," he said coldly. "You don't belong in this house. You don't belong in this world." Every word hit her like a blow. The other servants turned away. The air in the room felt heavy. "Pack your things," Khalid ordered. "You're finished." The housekeeper hesitated, glancing at Emily's tearful face. "Sir, please. She has nowhere to go. She's been working hard." "Enough," Khalid snapped. "This is my house. I don't tolerate weakness." Emily tried to speak again, but her throat closed. She bowed her head, tears spilling silently onto the marble floor. Within the hour, she was gone, escorted out by guards, clutching a small bag of clothes and a few unpaid wages. As she stepped out into the scorching desert sun, she looked back at the towering palace behind her, shimmering like a mirage. "I'll never come back," she whispered to herself, voice breaking. That night, Khalid dined alone on his terrace, overlooking the city skyline. He had forgotten about the maid already. To him, she was one of hundreds, replaceable, insignificant. He believed that people like her existed only to serve, and that power was earned through control, not compassion. But somewhere deep inside, a faint echo of guilt stirred, a voice he ignored. Years passed. Khalid grew richer, more powerful, but his empire came at a cost. Enemies multiplied. Friends disappeared, and a strange emptiness began to follow him from one luxury suite to another. The world saw a man who had everything, but when the lights went out, he saw only the ghosts of those he had crushed along the way. And far from the glittering towers of Dubai, in a small clinic in Nairobi, Emily Carter was rebuilding her life. She had joined a humanitarian organization that helped refugees across the region. Her kindness and determination caught the attention of doctors who trained her to become a medical assistant. She worked tirelessly, saving the lives of strangers, carrying with her the memory of that humiliating day, not as a curse, but as a promise. One day, she told herself, life would give her a chance to prove her worth. She just didn't know that destiny was already moving its pieces, and that the same man who had once broken her spirit would one day beg her to save his life. The year was 2019. Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid had conquered everything a man could desire: wealth, fame, and the silent reverence of an empire built on oil and influence. Yet beneath his marble floors and private jets, the ground had begun to crack. It started subtly: a missed call from his financial advisor, whispers about political instability in one of his oil-rich territories, an urgent letter from London warning him of unethical investments under investigation. Khalid brushed it all off. "Do you think a storm can shake the desert?" he said to his assistant, pouring himself black coffee on the balcony of his penthouse. But storms have a way of eroding even the tallest dunes. By the end of that week, the British government froze his international assets. The media called it the Al-Rashid scandal, linking his company to a bribery network he knew nothing about, or so he claimed. Overnight, contracts worth billions collapsed. His name was splashed across newspapers not as a titan, but as a tyrant. Inside his palace, his staff whispered behind closed doors. Men who once bowed to him now avoided his gaze. The board demanded answers, and Khalid, too proud to admit his empire was bleeding, lashed out. "You all think I built this fortune on luck?" he roared in a meeting, slamming his fist against a glass table. "I carried this company on my back." No one dismisses Khalid al-Rashid. But power is like water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. Days later, his private security chief resigned. His oldest friend, Tariq, the one who had stood beside him since university, sold his shares and vanished. His younger brother, Faisal, called from London, not to offer help, but to warn him. The government is looking for someone to blame. If you stay in Dubai, they'll come for you. Khalid stared at the phone in disbelief. The world he had ruled for decades was turning its back. He dismissed it all with pride. "Let them come," he muttered. "They'll see who I am." But even his body began to betray him. Headaches, fatigue, the sharp pain in his chest that came and went like a cruel joke. The palace doctor begged him to rest, but Khalid refused. "I don't rest," he said coldly. "Rest is for the weak." He spent his nights pacing through empty halls once filled with laughter and music. The sound of his footsteps echoed against the silence, reminding him of how alone he had become. The same servants who once feared him now looked at him with pity, and that, more than anything, enraged him. One evening, during a rare sandstorm that turned the sky blood orange, Khalid drove into the desert. He wanted silence, a place where the world's noise couldn't reach him. The wind howled, burying tire tracks behind him as he went deeper into nothingness. He parked beside a lonely dune and stepped out, the air thick with dust. Lightning split the horizon. For a moment, he stood there, watching the sky burn. His thoughts drifted, not to his fortune, but to the faces he'd stepped on to build it. To the maid he'd humiliated years ago, the one who had looked at him not with hate, but with heartbreak. He couldn't even remember her name. The sandstorm grew violent. His phone lost signal, and as he turned to head back, his SUV refused to start. He cursed, slammed the door, tried again, nothing. Within minutes, the wind buried the wheels in sand. He was stranded. Khalid wrapped his keffiyeh over his mouth, shielding himself from the dust. "I've survived worse," he growled, stepping out to walk toward the distant lights of the city. But the storm swallowed the world whole. He lost his bearings, tripped, fell, and kept walking. The temperature dropped. His vision blurred. His chest burned. Hours later, a rescue team found only his abandoned car. When Khalid opened his eyes again, the ceiling was white, not gold. Machines beeped softly. A faint smell of antiseptic filled the air. His throat was dry, his vision hazy. He wasn't in a palace or a private hospital. He was in a humanitarian medical camp. He tried to sit up, but a gentle hand stopped him. "Easy," a woman's voice said. "You're safe now." He blinked, confused. The voice was calm, familiar somehow. When his vision cleared, he saw her, a woman in a simple uniform, her hair tied back, her face partially covered by a medical mask. Her eyes, though soft, steady blue, struck something deep within him. "Where am I?" he rasped. "You were found unconscious near the border," she said. "Severe dehydration, heart strain. You're lucky to be alive." He frowned. "I don't take charity." Her tone didn't change. "Then think of it as mercy." For a moment, he stared at her, trying to place her face. But his mind was fogged with exhaustion. When she stepped away to adjust his floor, he caught a glimpse of her name badge, Emily Carter. He froze. No, it couldn't be. He wanted to speak, to ask if it was truly her, but his throat failed him. She noticed a look in his eyes, but said nothing. She simply whispered, "Rest, Sheikh Khalid. You'll need your strength." As she walked away, he felt something he hadn't in years. Vulnerability. The man who once ruled skyscrapers and oil fields now lay helpless in a tent, under the care of the very woman he had cast into the streets. Outside, the storm continued to rage, shaking the camp walls. Inside, fate had just reunited two souls, one broken by pride, the other healed by compassion. And neither of them knew that this was only the beginning. Morning broke slowly over the desert, painting the sky in pale gold. Inside the humanitarian camp, the hum of generators mixed with distant voices, the clatter of metal trays, and the soft rhythm of wind against canvas. Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid lay awake in his cot, staring at the ceiling, his mind spinning like a storm that refused to die. For the first time in his adult life, he was powerless. No guards, no assistants, no empire at his command. Just the weight of his body, the ache in his chest, and the faint scent of disinfectant that reminded him how far he'd fallen. He tried to sit up, but dizziness forced him back. His muscles trembled, not from fear, but from weakness. A nurse entered to check his vitals, and he turned away, ashamed that anyone should see him like this. When she left, the tent flap opened again. Emily walked in. She carried a notebook and a small tray with a cup of water. Her steps were calm, measured. She didn't glance at him with pity or awe. She looked at him as she would any other patient. That bothered him more than he expected. "You need to hydrate," she said, setting the cup beside him. He stared at her for a moment, his voice hoarse. "How long have I been here?" 2 days. You were found by a group of volunteers. You collapsed less than 20 miles from the border." He closed his eyes. 20 miles from my own land. That's almost poetic. Her tone remained even. "You're lucky they found you before the sand did." Khalid looked at her closely now. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, sun-streaked and tied back. Her skin had the soft bronze tone of someone who worked outdoors every day. The lines near her eyes spoke of years lived hard, but her gaze was steady, strong. She was no longer the trembling maid he'd dismissed. "Your name," he said quietly, "is Emily Carter." She paused. "Yes, from America." A flicker across her face. "You remember?" "I remember a maid who dropped a tray," he murmured. "I thought I'd never see her again." Emily looked down, adjusting his four-tube. "You didn't see me again. You saw what your anger wanted to see." The words struck deeper than he expected. He wanted to defend himself, to tell her that he was under pressure that day, that the glassware was expensive, that he had built his life on precision. But the excuses tasted bitter on his tongue. "I wronged you," he said finally. She didn't respond. Instead, she handed him a pill. "Take this. It will help with the chest pain." Khalid took it, his pride fighting every movement. He, the man who once commanded nations to kneel, now obeyed the quiet instruction of a woman he had once discarded. Later that afternoon, he asked for a mirror. Emily hesitated, but brought one from the supply tent. He looked at his reflection and barely recognized a man staring back. His beard had grown uneven, his eyes hollow. The white kandura had been replaced by a hospital gown. "Vanity dies hard," Emily said softly, noticing the look on his face. "It's not vanity," he said. "It's disbelief." She tilted her head. "Disbelief in what?" "That this is what remains of me." "You're alive," she said. "That's more than most can say." He gave a dry laugh. "Alive, yes, but without purpose, without dignity." Emily crossed her arms. "Maybe dignity isn't what you think it is." He looked up sharply. "And what would you know about dignity?" "I know it's not measured by marble floors or expensive suits," she said quietly. "It's what you do when no one's watching. It's how you treat people when you think they don't matter." Her words hit harder than the sandstorm that had nearly killed him. For a moment, he wanted to argue, but something inside him broke instead. His throat tightened. He turned his face away, embarrassed by the sting in his eyes. "Rest," she said after a silence. "You'll heal faster if you stop fighting everyone, including yourself." As she walked out, Khaled felt a strange mix of shame and relief. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not since his mother, long before power replaced tenderness in his life. Days passed. The camp was alive with movement. Children laughing, volunteers running supplies, nurses caring for patients in the scorching heat. Khaled watched them from his cot, slowly regaining his strength. He began to notice things he'd never cared before: the way the doctor smiled even when exhausted, the way Emily kneeled beside the wounded, whispering comfort, her touch steady and sure. One evening, he saw her outside, treating a small boy who had cut his foot. The boy cried, afraid of the antiseptic. Emily knelt, held his hand, and said something that made him laugh. Her smile, simple, genuine, disarmed Khaled completely. He had seen that same tenderness once before in another life, when she begged him for mercy. He stepped closer, his footsteps quiet on the sand. When she noticed him, she didn't flinch. "Feeling stronger?" she asked. "Stronger, but smaller," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "That's progress." He looked at the camp around them. "You live here?" "For now," she said. "We move every few months, depending on the needs. Refugees, famine, drought, you name it. And this life satisfies you." "It humbles me," she corrected. "And that's better than satisfaction." Khaled looked away, his throat tightening again. He wanted to tell her that he admired her, that her strength unsettled him in ways he didn't understand. But the words caught in his chest. Instead, he said softly, "You're nothing like the woman I remember." "I had to become someone else," she replied. "We all do when life gives us no choice." That night, Khaled couldn't sleep. The pain in his chest had faded, but something deeper hurt, a hollow in his heart he'd ignored for years. He thought about his empire, his fall, and the irony of fate bringing him here. In the faint glow of the oil lamp, he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is mercy after all." Outside, Emily walked past his tent, unaware he was awake. For a brief moment, her shadow paused, as if she felt his gaze. Then she moved on. Neither spoke again that night, but both carried the same unspoken thought, that destiny was not finished with them yet. The storm had passed, but peace did not follow. 2 weeks after Khaled's collapse, his strength returned enough for him to walk outside the tent. The camp sat in the middle of the desert, surrounded by sand stretching endlessly in every direction. It should have felt like freedom, but to him, it felt like exile. He spent his morning sitting under a canvas awning, drinking tea, pretending not to notice the glances from volunteers who whispered his name when they thought he couldn't hear. Some of them had recognized him. The once mighty billionaire, now recovering in rags. The news had traveled faster than he could imagine. Somewhere, a journalist had caught wind of the rumor. Disgraced Sheikh found alive in humanitarian camp. Emily noticed the tension, but said nothing. She had seen what gossip did to people. Instead, she focused on keeping him occupied. She handed him files, asked him to help translate medical forms into Arabic, and even encouraged him to speak to the refugees who came for aid. At first, he resisted. "I am not a nurse," he said coldly. "And they don't need me." "They don't need a nurse," Emily replied. They need someone who understands their pride. Her words stayed with him. That afternoon, he found himself sitting beside an old man whose hands trembled from dehydration. The man recognized Khalid immediately, but said nothing. He simply whispered, "God humbles those he loves most." The phrase hit Khalid like a blade. That night, he couldn't sleep. The next morning, a convoy of black SUVs appeared on the horizon. Men in suits and sunglasses stepped out, scanning the camp. Khalid tensed immediately. He recognized the insignia on one of the cars, his company security detail. His past had found him. Emily came out of the medical tent, her brow furrowed. "Who are they?" Khalid rose to his feet, the wind tugging at his loose white robe. "Trouble," he said quietly. A tall man approached, his voice sharp and commanding. "Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid," he said in Arabic. "By order of the Dubai High Court, you are wanted for questioning. You must come with us immediately." Emily stepped between them instinctively. "He's still recovering. He's not ready to travel." The man gave her a cold look. "This is not your concern." "It is," she said, her voice steady. "He's my patient." Khalid's chest tightened, not from fear, but from the sight of her standing in front of him like a shield. No one had ever done that for him. "Enough," Khalid said, stepping forward. "I'll go." But before he could move, his vision blurred. The stress, the heat, the exhaustion, it all struck at once. He collapsed, clutching his chest as pain shot through his body. Emily caught him before he hit the ground, shouting orders to the medics. "Move! Get him inside." The agents tried to intervene, but her authority in that moment was absolute. "If you take him now, he'll die on the road," she snapped. "You'll have a corpse, not a witness." Reluctantly, they backed off. Hours later, Khalid lay unconscious, hooked to monitors and IVs. His heart had nearly given out again. Emily sat beside him, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse. She had seen many patients, many faces fade before her eyes, but this was different. Somewhere deep inside, she still remembered that young maid crying under the glare of his fury. She had promised herself she would never feel pity for him, but pity had long turned into something else. When he finally woke, his eyes found hers immediately. "You saved me," he whispered. "You're stubborn," she replied softly. "But you're alive." He swallowed hard. "Why would you care? After everything I did?" She hesitated. "Because forgiveness isn't about you. It's about me." He looked away, ashamed. "Then I don't deserve it." "Maybe not," she said, "but that's not for me to decide." The tent fell silent, except for the steady beep of the monitor. Outside, the desert wind sighed against the canvas like a living thing. That night, the camp director entered with a satellite phone. "Sheikh Khalid," he said carefully, "your lawyer from Dubai wishes to speak." Khalid took the phone reluctantly. The voice on the other end was cold and sharp. "You become a spectacle, Khalid. The media's eating it up. Some think you're dead. Others call you a coward hiding among beggars. The board is collapsing. You need to return before they destroy what's left." Khalid closed his eyes. And what would I return to? A company full of vultures? A name covered in shame? "Better that than rotting in a tent," the lawyer snapped. He ended the call, dropping the phone beside the bed. Emily watched him silently from the doorway. "What will you do?" she asked. He stared at the floor for a long time. "For the first time in my life, I don't know." Over the next days, the agents grew restless. They pressured the camp to release him, threatening legal action. But Emily and the doctors refused until he was stable. Khalid felt torn between two worlds: the empire of gold that awaited him and the humble community that had shown him what humanity meant. One evening, he stood at the edge of the camp, watching the sunset bleed across the dunes. Emily approached quietly, her scarf fluttering in the warm breeze. "You'll have to face them eventually," she said. "I know." "Then face them with truth, not pride." He turned to her, eyes weary. "You make it sound simple." "It never is," she replied, smiling faintly. "But it's the only way to start over." Khalid looked at her, really looked, at the woman he had once dismissed as nothing, who now stood as the only person he trusted. "If I go back," he said, They'll destroy me. Then maybe it's time to rebuild something new, she said. Her words echoed through him like a promise. As the last light faded, he whispered, "If I survive this, it will be because of you." And Emily, her heart trembling with something she couldn't name, answered quietly, "Then make it worth saving." 3 weeks later, the sun rose over Dubai with the same blinding brilliance it always had. But for Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid, it no longer looked like home. The skyline glittered like polished steel, the towers he once owned now looming over him like silent judges. As his private jet descended onto the tarmac, he felt the weight of the city pressing against his chest. Not pride this time, but fear. The flight from Africa had been quiet. Emily had wanted to come with him, but the humanitarian organization needed her elsewhere. Before he boarded, she had placed her hand gently on his arm and said, "Whatever happens, don't lose the man you found out there." He nodded without trusting himself to speak. Those words had stayed with him the entire flight. When he stepped off the plane, his former lawyer, Samir, waited at the gate with 2 men in suits. Their expressions were strained, respect mixed with calculation. "Welcome home, Sheikh Khalid," Samir said carefully. "We weren't sure you'd come back." "I gave my word," Khalid replied, his voice calm but edged. They entered the limousine, the air conditioning humming like a heartbeat. The city rolled past, streets he had once ruled through power and money. Every billboard, every glass window reflected his ghost. "What's the situation?" he asked. Samir cleared his throat. "The government lifted your travel restriction temporarily, but the investigations continue. You've lost most of your holdings abroad. Here, in Dubai, your board voted to suspend your authority pending review." "In other words," Khalid said, "they replaced me." Samir hesitated. "Your brother Faisal is acting chairman." Khalid's jaw tightened. Faisal, the younger brother who had once shadowed him like a loyal soldier, now the vulture feeding on his throne. "Take me to the company," Khalid said coldly. The Al-Rashid corporate tower rose like a blade of glass into the morning sky. Inside, whispers followed him as he entered. Employees who had once stood at attention now lowered their heads, unsure whether to greet or avoid him. In the boardroom, Faisal stood at the head of the table, surrounded by executives in tailored suits. His smile was polished. "Practice, brother," Faisal said warmly, spreading his arms. "You look well. We were worried." Khalid ignored the embrace. "Worried or relieved?" Faisal chuckled. "You misunderstand me. I did what was necessary to protect the company while you were indisposed." "Indisposed," Khalid repeated softly. "That's one word for being left to die in the desert." The silence that followed was sharp. Khalid moved closer, eyes locked on Faisal's. "Tell me, little brother, who leaked the bribery documents to the press?" Faisal's expression didn't change. "The investigation is ongoing." "I didn't ask for a report," Khalid snapped. "I asked for the truth." Faisal leaned in. "The truth, Khalid, is that the empire you built was rotting long before I took over. You surrounded yourself with fear, not loyalty. People obeyed you because they were afraid of you, not because they respected you." Khalid froze. The words cut deep because they were true. Faisal continued, his tone almost sympathetic. "You taught me everything: strength, ambition, control. But you forgot to teach me mercy. I learned that from watching you destroy it." Khalid's voice dropped to a whisper. "You betrayed me." Faisal stepped back. "I set you free." The words echoed like thunder. Khalid wanted to strike him, to shout, but all he felt was exhaustion. For the first time, he realized how much of his life had been built on fear, and how easily it had crumbled. "I'll clear my name," he said finally, "not for the company. For myself." Faisal smiled faintly. "Then may God help you." That night, Khalid returned to his penthouse overlooking the marina. The rooms were spotless, untouched, but lifeless. He walked through the silence, past marble floors that gleamed like mirrors, past a grand piano that hadn't been played in years. Everything smelled of money and emptiness. He sat at the window, watching the city lights shimmer on the water. The same skyline that once made him proud now felt distant, artificial. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph Emily had given him before he left, a snapshot of the children she worked with at the camp, smiling despite their hardships. On the back, she had written only 2 words, "Stay human." He stared at the words until they blurred. For the first time, he picked up his phone and called the press. "This is Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid," he said. "Tomorrow morning, I'll address the nation." The next day, the conference hall was packed. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, live streams rolled across the internet. When Khalid stepped onto the stage, wearing a simple dark suit instead of his royal white robes, the room fell silent. He began slowly. "There was a time when I believed that power could protect me, that wealth could cleanse me of my sins. I was wrong." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I lost everything," he continued. "But in that loss, I found something greater, the truth of who I was. I built an empire on pride and forgot the meaning of compassion. I wronged people, I hurt those who served me, and I justified it in the name of discipline. I stand here not as a billionaire, but as a man who has learned humility." The hall went utterly quiet. "I will cooperate with every investigation," Khalid said. "I have nothing left to hide, but I also have nothing left to fear." When he finished, there was no applause, only stunned silence. Hours later, his phone buzzed with messages, some calling him brave, others calling him foolish. But amid them was one number he recognized immediately. Emily. Her message read, "Proud of you. The world needed to see this version of you." He smiled for the first time in months. The ache in his chest eased, replaced by something warm and quiet. For years, he had chased power to fill the void. Now, standing at the edge of ruin, he had found something far rarer, peace. But just as he began to breathe again, a knock came at his door. It was Samir, his lawyer, pale and sweating. "Khalid, there's something you need to see." He handed over a folder marked confidential. Inside was a single document, a transfer authorization for several offshore accounts. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable. Emily Carter. Khalid's heart stopped. The photograph slipped from his hand. Khalid's fingers tightened around the folder until the paper bent. He read the name again, disbelieving his eyes. Emily Carter. Her signature was neat, deliberate, the same handwriting he had seen on her medical forms at the camp. The document authorized a transfer of over $10 million from one of his private offshore accounts to an untraceable foundation. The date was recent, signed while he had been recovering in Africa. He sank into his chair, the city lights blurring beyond the glass wall of his penthouse. No, he thought, it can't be her. Emily wasn't like the others. She wasn't greedy. She had saved him. Samir stood silently, uneasy. "We traced the document through your London accounts. The authorization came from the same satellite network used at the camp. Either she had access to your information or someone used her name." Khalid's voice was hollow. "Find out which." Samir nodded and left quickly, leaving him alone with the unbearable silence. All night, Khalid couldn't sleep. Every memory of Emily, her calm voice, her kindness, the way she looked at him with steady compassion, twisted into doubt. Had she been playing him all along? Was her mercy just a disguise? He replayed every word she'd said. "Forgiveness isn't about you." Was that her warning? Or her confession? By dawn, he couldn't bear it. He ordered his jet prepared and flew back toward the African border. The moment the wheels touched the dusty runway near the refugee camp, he stepped out before the engine stopped. The camp looked the same. Rows of tents, the smell of cooking fires, the cries of children in the distance. But something inside him was different now, harder, colder. He strode through the sand until he reached the medical tent. Emily was there, kneeling beside a child with a fever. When she saw him, surprise flickered in her eyes, followed by concern. "Khalid, what are you doing here? You shouldn't travel." He threw the folder onto the table. Paper scattered like dry leaves. "What is this?" he demanded. She froze, staring at the document. "Where did you get that?" "You tell me," he snapped. "It's your name, your signature. $10 million transferred out of my accounts. From the same network you used here." Her expression didn't change. "And you think I did this?" I don't think, he said sharply. I know what I see. Emily took a slow breath, then looked straight into his eyes. You came all this way not to ask, but to accuse. I trusted you, Khalid said, his voice cracking under the weight of his anger. I defended you in my mind when the world called me a fool. I thought you were the one honest person left, but you were just like everyone else. She rose to her feet, her calm replaced by hurt. If you believe that so easily, maybe you never knew me at all. Khalid stepped closer. Tell me the truth. I already did, she said quietly. I didn't take your money. He stared at her, searching for a lie, but her eyes didn't waver. He wanted to believe her, but the storm inside him wouldn't let him. I have proof, he said coldly. Your name is on it. Then someone put it there, she said. Someone who wanted to destroy what little trust you've rebuilt. The wind outside howled, rattling the canvas walls. You expect me to believe that? He asked. No, she said, stepping back. I expect you to decide who you really are, the man who listens or the one who destroys before asking why. Her words pierced through his fury, but pride held him silent. Without another word, he turned and left the tent. For the next 2 days, Khalid stayed in a small hotel near the airstrip, restless and haunted. Samir called again. We found something, he said. The transfer wasn't just to any foundation. It went to Hope Horizon International, the same charity funding Emily's medical missions. Khalid's stomach turned. So it's true? Not exactly, Samir said. We checked the metadata on the signature file. The timestamp doesn't match her location log. The signal originated from Dubai, from your company's main server. Khalid went silent. Samir continued carefully. Whoever forged this wanted you to turn against her. Khalid hung up without replying. Shame hit him like a wave. He'd accused the only person who had stood by him when everyone else abandoned him. He got into his car and drove back to the camp, his mind racing with regret. The desert blurred past, the heat shimmering like punishment. When he arrived, the camp was in chaos. Trucks loaded with supplies stood half empty, volunteers shouting orders. He spotted the director. Where's Emily? She's gone, the man said. Left this morning. There was a message for you. He handed Khalid an envelope, worn and sealed with a strip of medical tape. Inside, her handwriting flowed across a single page. Khalid, I don't know what you believe anymore, but I understand why you're angry. You've lived your whole life surrounded by betrayal. It's hard to see kindness and not question its price. I didn't steal from you. I only tried to save you from yourself. If I could ask one thing, it would be this. Stop fighting the world long enough to listen to it. You can rebuild everything you lost, but not until you forgive what's gone. Be the man I saw when you had nothing. That man is worth everything. Emily. Khalid folded the letter slowly, his eyes burning. Around him, the camp buzzed with life, the sound of people who had nothing but gave everything anyway. He looked toward the horizon, where a convoy of aid trucks disappeared into the distance. Somewhere out there, Emily was continuing her mission, helping people he would never meet. For a long time, he stood in silence, the desert wind brushing against his face. Then he whispered, almost to himself, You saved me twice, once with mercy and once with truth. He turned back toward his car, his reflection faint in the windshield. Not the sheik who had ruled through fear, but man stripped bare, rebuilding from the ashes. And though Emily was gone, her voice stayed with him, quiet but unbreakable. Stay human.